Hello, for today's video for encouragement for the family, I want to talk to you about what I'll call the myth of the teenage rebel. The myth of the teenage rebel. I have found over the years that there's kind of this thought that all teenagers are going to go through, some unusual forms of rebellion. It's just going to happen. It's bound to happen. And I don't believe that's really true. Um, I have also interacted with parents that over the years have told me that if they had certain standards or rules in their home, that those would sort of breed rebellion. And I would always encourage those families to not fear proper discipline. Now, of course, the emphasis on proper discipline. But when we think about teenagers rebelling, I think what we ought to start with is simply this. We just have to understand sin nature, that it's not teenagers that rebel, it's human beings that rebel, that we're all born with this sin nature. We're born rebellious. And so children and teens, like all people, including adults, they don't like always listening to authority. They often get frustrated when they're told what to do. They like to question everything, and they can be extremely stubborn when they think they're right. And so that is for all people because of the sin nature that we have. I would say that no one is naturally no one is naturally predisposed to submit, but they're actually quite the opposite. The tendency to rebel isn't contingent on just certain personality types or what happened to them as they left the birth canal. I mean, there's some really sort of silly ideas out there. And rebellion doesn't happen because of, one particular event in a person's life. So we start with the idea that from conception, we have sin nature. And the moment a child is born, they're rebels. We're all rebels. So here's the key. Although I'm going to talk a lot about teenagers today, for those that are early on in parenting, the key is to understand what I just said early on, that your child has a sin nature. They're rebellious. And deal with that rebellion early on. We've talked about this in other videos, to teach a child obedience and try to reach the heart of your child from the earliest of days. Young people, as they become teenagers, they're not guaranteed to rebel. But obviously, teenagers aren't guaranteed not to rebel either. The question is, what can we do in the home to help our teens with this natural tendency that they do have to rebel? And so that's what I hope to be a help with and encouragement with today. And with that topic, I would simply say this. Here are the keys: trust, communication, and the centrality of God in the home. So I kind of want to work through those ideas. In your home, developing trust, having open communication, and making sure that Christ is the center of your home. So let's start with this. Number one, establish trust in the home. And that may prevent your teenager from feeling distant in the home. So when you make decisions that impact your teenager, talk that over with them. Let your teens know what you believe and why you believe it. When you have standards and rules in your house, make sure they're reasonable. Make sure they're biblically principled. Have a time and a place where you can have life talks with older adolescents and teens. And with that, work for respect in the home. And that's got to start early on as well. the idea of respect has really been, I think, in many ways lost in our culture. In fact, programs for adolescents and teenagers, music, entertainment, social media, is actually teaching them at best that adults just don't know what's up, and at worst, they don't deserve respect. And we need to counter that with our young people. We also live in a society where the focus is on self, resulting in extreme selfishness. Parents can even contribute to that when they put their children's wants over the family's needs. Children should not get everything they want. And so with children, we need to shift their focus from me, where it's naturally going to be, shift their focus from me to we, and teach them that their behaviors and their actions aren't just going to affect them, but they'll affect others as well. And so, number one, establish trust and respect in the home. The second thing of importance is be loving but firm. Be firm and be loving. Be extremely encouraging, but also expect and demand obedience from your children. So many parents I see today are all about the encouragement. And I don't want you to misunderstand me. We need to be encouraging, and we need to encourage our children. But for one reason or another, some parents can tend to be blind toward their children's sinful faults. They find it difficult to see the wrong in their lives. They give constant praise but lack confronting what is wrong. We can't do that. We should praise them when they do things that are praiseworthy, and we should confront them when they're being sinful, when they've done wrong. Now, other parents can have the tendency to do just the opposite. They don't pay attention to their kids unless they're doing something wrong, and then they just kind of blow up in anger. Or even if they don't explode in anger, they only ever criticize and never praise their children. And I've tried to be honest with you about my parenting, and I would say that I at times tended to be unbalanced on that side, not giving enough encouragement, not giving enough praise, and having the tendency to maybe be critical. So we need to balance that stuff out. In other words, reach the happy medium. So what does that mean? Don't coddle your children, but don't nitpick them either. Give legitimate encouragement. Don't lie to them and tell them that they're great at something when they're not. So the second thing, be loving, but be firm. And then number three, have open communication. And this is so important. Be a good listener with teenagers. Talk about what's going on in their lives. There may be times where they don't necessarily want to do that. And so find ways to bring those conversations out. When you can, share things with them, especially the things that impact them personally. So I'm talking about share even personal things with them that may or do have an impact on them personally. Have those conversations with them. You can build up legitimate partnerships with your teenagers. If you can develop that, they may not feel the need to rebel to be heard or to be understood or to get their own way. And if you can do this, they can learn that if you say no, it's for good reason. Never encourage any idea that teenage rebellion is automatic. This is one of those things that the groundwork has to be laid at a very early age. Discipline them strongly when they roll their eyes, when they act exasperated, when they display a bad attitude, when they act defiant. You've got to deal with those things early on. And so parents, if you'll do that with your children when they're very little, it'll go a long way in helping you when your children reach the teenage years where now they're wanting to be more independent, when they're naturally asking more questions and they want to explore different things. When they get older, don't give them any idea that teenage rebellion is a normal part of growing up and that the only way to learn is from making their own mistakes, and that there's some kind of natural process that they'll go through where they'll need to sort of sow their wild oats before they can mature. If you do those kinds of things, they may fulfill your expectations. But rather teach them to make positive choices, to act like an adult. This doesn't mean that they can't enjoy their teenage years. It means they can have fewer regrets through the process. In fact, involve them in fun, guilt-free activities. Don't give a Christian teenager any kind of idea that living a Christian life, trying to be godly, is either going to be a killjoy or it's boring. That is a total misconception of our God. Young people can have fun, they can enjoy things in non-sinful ways, and then they have a guilt-free life. So teach them that a Christian can have a load of fun without being worldly, and give them legitimate freedoms. And then number 4, make God the center of your home. This keeps coming up in my videos, and for obvious reasons. Let me put it this way. What do you let your home revolve around? From a biblical standpoint, it should not revolve around work. It shouldn't involve around sports. It shouldn't revolve around music lessons. It shouldn't revolve around recreational activities. It shouldn't even really revolve around school activities. All of those things are good. All of those things are important. All of those are things that you might want to expose your children to, but life should not revolve around those things. They should revolve around our God and the Word of God, and living lives that are pleasing to God and glorifying to God. With that, I would say beware of the child-centered home. Make sure your home is not a child-centered home. It should be centered on Christ, with God as the authority, with dad as the leader, and with mom and dad working to nurture their children in the ways of the Lord. Families who drop everything for good grades, who aren't faithful to church because they've had a busy week, or because there's some other event that we want to put in the place of that, or we don't go because we're tired or we don't feel like it, or because we choose extracurricular activities over youth group. They do all of those things at the detriment of their children's spiritual development and maturity. So put God first above everything. Make his church a priority, where you serve as a family together in the local church, and you let all the other priorities fall below that. So I think these are the keys in helping adolescents in the teenage years develop trust and respect, have open communication, and make God and his word and his ways the center of your home.